It was a lawyer, set up language for the town, all that kind of stuff. He's speaking on the front porch. We're going to look at all these buildings. And people are sort of gathered around to hear the speech, which we do not have, or I haven't seen a copy of it. Okay, here is, now that was 1869, here's 1877, but you got to be careful when you look at old maps. My background is geography and I'm kind of familiar with this stuff. In those days, when the maps were dated, the information for those maps was likely to be quite a bit older and not necessarily reflective of that year. These maps, that's true. They are what happened then. But I do want to draw your attention. Here is the dam, the river, Wood Square. But notice these buildings here. They're actually separate buildings, not like what we're familiar with today. Because from the river all the way up and around down to the Hudson House, except for the alley, they're all continuous buildings. But in the early days, not so. Okay, we're going to look as if we're up here, and that's kind of over, actually, I think it's over like St. Michael's Church, looking down. And we have what is called a bird's eye view. These are incredible. We have this in the society. And we've scanned it. There were quite a number of these done. They weren't done from balloons. They were done by skilled artists who laid out the streets and then put themselves up as if they were a bird's eye. And they are called bird's eye views. This is 1878, about the same time as that map. Here is the river. The dam is here. The Assabet, we talked about these buildings last time. Here is Wood Square, and we're going to look and take a little tour around Wood Square. So we'll zoom in a little bit. Here's the town hall on your left. Here is Pope Street, Felton. It gets a little complicated here because there isn't anything there now. It's the Rotary. But this will be Washington Street going up and all the way across the dam. And what we're going to do is look at a couple of these and then come back and look around this way. And next time, if we don't do you in, we're going to tour down Main Street and look at some of those buildings. And many of them are on that walking tour. Okay. I'm not sure it was clear. This is the first building we're going to look at. The pictures that you will see actually predate that building, but we're talking about the location of the building. Here's one of the very first. Residents of the late Silas Felton, died in 28, so this sketch was probably about 1830. I mean, if you refer to somebody as late, it wasn't a long time ago, it was fairly recent. Silas Felton, very important guy. He was selectman, he was treasurer, he was a moderator, he held every spot. Trouble with tracing some of this stuff. His son was Silas Felton. So, you know, when you try to put some of this stuff together, it can get a little interesting. But this was his house. And here is a building, a commercial building next to it. Notice this tree has a couple of barriers. Same place. This is a photo now. I'm not sure when. 1850s maybe. Here's the house. Here's the store. And obviously, because of kids speeding along in their rigs, probably on the damn cell phone, they had to do this so they wouldn't crash into the tree. Damn kids. You think it's all just now where kids speed along, not paying attention. Okay, well, here it is again, somewhat later. I assume this is later because the trees are gone. There is the original. And this is now a store. It's a little hard to read, furniture and carpets, but a relatively small building here. And that's about where it was. Can't be any more specific than that, but somewhere along through there. Of course, there was no South Street at that time. And we know it was not right at the dam because there was a factory there at the dam. So, okay, well, moving up a little bit, can I picture where we are? We're kind of walking up Washington Street. The postmen have a real fun here because where does Washington and Lincoln and Maine, I mean, it's really a mess. And the reasons it's a mess is because the selectmen, very late 1800s, when they had to start naming streets because they got too many people, met somewhere around Cox Street and said, this is here, that's there. And because the fire station, which is directly across the street from the apartments, are on different streets. Love it. Okay, well, we're going to look here. We were over to the right before. Now we're moving up. This is the Brigham, so-called Brigham block. Kind of a handsome store. And you can see between there and the post office, you can see Pope's Hill off in the back, which is quite clear. Clear isn't cleared. And then this is the Chase House, and this very hard to read. This is Silas Manson, no relation to Charles, I believe. But notice they're really separate buildings, and all they did was just to put up a barrier here to kind of make it like, you know, they were sort of continuous. A somewhat later picture. This one obviously survived the great Hudson earthquake of. Oh, did I say that?
Earthquake.
There was no Hudson earthquake. Glass slides. And glass slides are absolutely incredible, but they tend to break, and that's what you get. But this was, what does it say? Cochrane and Whitman. Cochrane was a druggist, and the Cochrane building, which you'll see here in a moment.
What does it say about that?
Well, Daniel Stratton Insurance up here. I think this was Priest selling boots and shoes. Jocelyn, the lawyer, was up here. And the GAR met up, I don't know if you can see this here. It's a shield. And if you spend any time out west, the Union Pacific uses that shield. It kind of looks a little bit like a flag. And that is the shield of the GAR. The Grand Army of the Republic. Are there any Civil War historians? Because actually I have a GAR belt buckle, which we picked up in Sudbury, and it's a real one. And the reason I know it's a real one, guys, not gals, how do you put a belt on? This is a stupid question. But you take the belt and you probably go like this. You go to the left, correct? Can't do it. This one goes to the right because of the buckle. It's just a hook on the back. And if anybody's really into it, I'm not going to take the pants off, but I'll take the buckle off, and you can look at it because on the four corners, it has the branches of the service at that time. Did not have the Air Force. Okay. Come on, you. Okay, moving up a little further, you'll see a picture of all of these in a moment. To the left of that building was the post office and express office. This was a very early version. One of the things, when you get pictures that you know are of the same thing, you look at them and say, this building looks totally different. Well, they did a lot of remodeling. Sometimes they tore buildings down and rebuilt them. So it can be kind of hard because most of those pictures, undated. And many of them don't even tell you where they are. But by taking pictures of places that you know, you can identify a lot of stuff, typically in the background. Okay, looking up close, the post office, the express office. Here's a scholar. That's what they called kids in school in those days. And this was almost the view in that bird's eye view of the Decoration Day. Remember the three girls in the front, over on the left? That's what was there. And that's about where you are. A little hard to tell here, but this is the Cochrane and then the Lawrence building. These buildings, well, let me leave it. You'll see about what happens here. Okay, well, let's go across the street. A very large building here. We have some fabulous pictures of this building. This is the one from the Decoration Day view that you originally saw. So, but zooming in, that's what happens. It pixelizes and you don't get very clear. But we do have a really good picture of that building. It's one of the best, the clearest picture of any of the buildings. This is the Trowbridge Shoe Factory. And the upper 3 floors, shoes, kids hanging out the window up here. What's happening here is, as we subsequently discovered, this is the militia on its return from the Great Boston Fire of 1870, 70. Very good. God, these people learn fast. That fire, by the way, was one of the major fires in the country, burnt 700 odd buildings. I mean, it was just incredible. Burnt out the heart of Boston, all wooden, and we'll see what happened in Hudson with a similar situation. We actually know who some of these people are, but nevertheless, Amson and Hall clothing on the left, Myron Hewitt over here on the right. You'll see what he was. The Pioneer printing, we have just a couple newspapers from the Pioneer. It lasted at about this time. It was like the third quarter of the 1800s, not too many issues. Okay, well, here was Hewitt. It was a jewelry store. Very similar to what we do today, except upstairs it's usually apartments rather than workshops. That was very common. On that site, this is what was there. Some of you may remember the town cleaners. And there was a post office. But now, a very, very nice remodeling of the so-called Chamberlain building. Because after Trowbridge, Chamberlain and Moulton got together. Okay, next door, should add, well, no, pointless. To the right was this house. This was Trowbridge's house. He lived right next door to the factory. And what's there now? Oh, yeah, St. Luke's. Yeah, built about 1911, quite a bit later. Okay, moving up a little further, we're here, down here, and then you see a number of other buildings. You kind of wonder, you know, what was there? Well, stuff came and went. When you read through this stuff, it's amazing how they moved buildings. They literally moved, and some were huge. You'll see this later. I mean, immense buildings. Okay, but here we are here in this quite handsome building. If the tree wasn't here, I think you would see this. I don't know what the architectural term is, but it's a mirror building. You could draw right down the middle, and what you see on the left with an L, you see on the right. This was the Thomas Atkinson building. He served in the Civil War. Married Emily, but he died. And That's an old picture. John Hardy, very famous bronze sculptor in the 20s, did a lot of these around the state. Very, very nice. That's an older one. Here's now. And if you were wondering, and I kind of, oh, come on you. Oh.
Don't say that word again.
Some of you might have followed the, how should we say, vagaries of the time capsule. We'll mention the time capsule a little bit later. Okay, but I went back, and we do actually have quite a bit of information about the town. It's remarkable. So I tried to put together a little bit just to give you a flavor of what land and buildings were worth in those days. And this is through business directories, which were the phone books before phones. Well, here's Thomas here. The house was worth $1,000, land was $200, tax was $30. And then Thomas went away, Mrs. Emily, his wife, and you can begin to see over time, 71, 49, land prices begin to creep up a little bit. It's not totally clear when you look at the entries exactly what you're dealing with, because they own they own like 7 acres up on Clark Street, and it's hard to tell. But you get a flavor of what went on here. And by the early 1890s, we're up to 2,800. I don't know why it was half a house. I think they probably sold the other half. It became a boarding house. 1906, the house was gone, as we'll see, but the land was 2,400. And the town report, we can buy it for $5,000. They bought it. The town bought it in 15, and in 18 renamed it Liberty Park. Okay. Well, moving up a little further, you can vision standing looking at Liberty Park, St. Luke's to your left, and library. Here things get a little difficult because I can't correlate the maps. The maps don't seem to agree. This is the so-called Witt House, and this house supposedly is on the lot that the library was subsequently located on. This elm tree has a very distinctive shape. This house, by the way, supposedly was moved to River Road, where it still exists. But this house, and that's almost the identical tree. I've lined up those two things, and it almost looks like an identical tree, but I don't quite know what was going on here. But this is the Frank Brown house. Frank Brown figures prominently in a moment. But handsome houses that fronted on the commercial heart of town. I mean, really beautiful houses. Somewhere in through there, not a modern picture, but you'll recognize. Oh, Dave Bonazzoli has just pulled up to the library in his favorite car. He wishes it was. Wonderful picture. Another older picture of the library. There we are there. We've had some renovations over time, acquired a second floor in the 30s, and in the 60s, the back. Okay, so much for the tour up the side. Now let's look at Wood Square itself. This gets a little interesting. This is a very old picture, no date. But this could even be the 1840s, although that seems awfully early, but certainly by the 1850s. No date, but if you look up tintype, I mean, this was a long time ago. But